What's new? What's the plans for the weekend?
Nice. 3-hour drive to some random school play tennis.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, we're to Iowa.
No,
Right.
this one.
that was last week.
Oh, that was last week.
Yeah,
Where is it this time?
No clue.
it's in Wisconsin somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright. Nice little drive, like see some nature, right?
That's the best part.
And half is the best part.
And that is.
Alright, so who all has presentations? Raise your hand. So I know about time. Just two? Okay, alright. So we talked about motivating operations last week. We covered, well, the previous classes, we kind of really talked in depth about positive reinforcement, negative punishment, showed how punishment doesn't usually change or modify behavior in the long term, right? We're gonna wrap up this chapter talking about the strength of the reinforcement, right? Or the types of the reinforcement, or situations that can affect the reinforcer that we're attempting to use, right? Things maybe at home that our client is doing, environment, contextual situations, things that can kind of work against us, right? Right, so here we're saying a reinforcer is a reinforcer, right? No? Right, we often say a reinforcer is only a reinforcer if it is reinforcing the target behavior of the individual. Remember, our concern is only about target behavior, right? Whether we are decreasing the behavior or increasing the behavior using some form of procedure or a stimulus, right? So we want to pay attention only to that, right? Of course, no one else often says that. In other words, if the behavior is not increasing in the appropriate manner, whatever we are giving or withholding to promote the behavior, change is not very effective. Does that mean that the reinforcer is wrong? Do we need to find something else? Let's see, maybe. So here we're just giving some diagrams, right? This one is preference assessment, right? So we're not going to get too technical into it, but you could be using these sorts of graph measurements to look at. These are edibles. We're talking about things that our individual client could be eating: Tootsie Rolls, Fruit Loops, raisins, corn pop, right? Another individual, popcorn, chips, pretzels. We can kind of see, does this modify behavior or not? Allowing them to eat this maybe as a positive reinforcer, right? And then we can kind of break it down. So, we need analytics to see what's happening. Good data, which is our next chapter, is data analysis and data collection. So the reinforcer may be right, but one of the following may be the problem.
All right, let's see.
Yes.
Climbing on the desk to grab something.
Yeah, you're like, hey, reinforcers, we saw something on the desk, obviously the kids wanted to treat, but the placement of it, you're like, well, very poor placement for the reinforcers, kind of free for all. It's not really reinforcer, right? It's gonna induce bad behavior, right? So you're like, hey, our situation with the reinforcement has to be meticulous. Where should we put it? Should we hide it until you complete the task? Should we put it in view as a motivating factor? But then you have to think, like, well, you put it in view, you're not gonna always have it in view in real life. I don't know, right? So just a lot of things we have to think about, right? Where do we place reinforcers at times, especially when it's something like a snack, right? Because oftentimes we can be like dogs. We see it, we salivate, right? We see it, we salivate. Or if we smell it, we salivate at the same time. So just some considerations. There's no variation. An example, the reinforcer is always good job. Or the magnitude of the reinforcer is too small, right? An example, 3 hours of work for only 5 minutes of computer time. 3 hours of work just to get 5 minutes of computer time? No, it's not gonna work, right? So you're kind of like, hey, how do you bridge the gap between this? Do you lessen the amount of time it's work? Do you increase the amount of computer time? Something to consider, right? meticulous. Very meticulous work. Who here wants to be registered behavioral technician, RBT, ABA? Anyone considering this type of work? No? Maybe? Right, it probably depends on your clientele. Maybe, I said you can use this type of work for anything. It could be for corporations, right? You can change work cultures, things of that nature. But obviously, most people go into working with children, specifically, majority of people working with children with autism spectrum, right? So unless you like to work with kids, that's a huge thing you should consider, right? But it works for adults as well too, right? We have a lot of people have substance abuse disorders. Order reinforcer is too big. An example, half-hour work for half-hour computer time. Like, God, that doesn't seem realistic, right? In the real world, you're not gonna get that sense of equality, usually for reinforcement, right? You're not gonna get a half-hour break for a half-hour work at your job, right? It's not gonna work that way. Or satiation, right? Maybe the culprit. Example, the child is supposed to be earning his or her favorite TV show tonight, but he or she has been watching TV all day. You're like, that's not good. You've already absorbed, satiated yourself with too much of the reinforcer during the daytime, so during the night, like that's probably not gonna work, right? So it has to be something that's not used or has access to all the time. Or there is a ratio or interval strain, which we'll talk about with data collection, right? But here they're telling us an example, the teen only has the opportunity to earn the use of the family car once every 3 months, right? So like the interval between using the vehicles to start too far wide, or the ratio is too large. A parent tells a 2-year-old they will both go play at the park if she is good all day, right? Like, good all day, what does that mean? None of us are good all day, right? So you're like, hey, impractical in the sense of actually trying to modify behavior over the long term, right? You're like, that's impractical. You're like, hey, if you are good at this particular time, if you're good while you're in class, right? You can get a reward. But if you're good all day, you're like, that's not gonna happen, right? The child's gonna be bad at some point in the day. So we don't wanna induce that behavior because the child picks it up like all day and it knows it acts bad all day. Now it's kind of skewed the way that it thinks about behavior modification, right? Or even reinforcement. It thinks it could get away with things. And another thing, all right, deprivation occurs when you remove or reduce access to a reinforcer, right? So if you want to use a child's favorite toy as a reinforcer, you might put it away for a few days, and then restrict access to opportunities contingent on the child's behavior, right? So once again, it's like having it too present, not a good thing, right? A little bit of deprivation may help. You might have a contract. Something like on Saturday after your toys are put away, your sheets are changed, your furniture is dusted, the floor is vacuumed, and your laundry is done, you may have your Game Boy until bedtime. Like, hey, it's specific, right? Specific. You're like, hey, remember we said step by step, clean up the room. You're like, what exactly does clean up my room mean? Bed, make up your bed, pick up the toys, organize this, fix that, get that off the floor, right? Because the child's gonna do it, generalize it in his mind, and then you're like, well, what about that, right? So the more specificity, the better. You're like, hey, each task, and the child is registering that, right? Thinking like, oh, the shoes, oh, man, this, right? I gotta get that before I'm able to get Game Boy, right? So don't generalize the task too much. However, withholding meals is usually unethical and illegal, right? We say withholding a meal is punishment, right? You say aversive stimulus, something that's aversive. Right? We all gotta eat, right? So if it makes someone hungry, it's a bit unethical, right? So yes, it's You cannot withhold meals or other necessary nutritional intake to create a deprivation state to compel someone to behave in certain ways. Can have very adverse effects. You know, we know that adolescents, particularly female adolescents, struggle with eating disorders, a pretty common thing in high school. So like you don't want to kind of create this sort of behavior modification for that to kind of come about. All right, if a person is a child, is elderly, or is disabled, or is in custodial or semi-custodial care, such as assisted living, or incarcerated, is usually against the law to withhold any part of a person's meal, except maybe a dessert. So we're saying things that are necessary nutritional value, right? Let's say you can get 3 meals a day, but I don't know if you need chocolate cake, right? What's it do for nutrition, right? So it's a bunch of sugar. So that may be a thing. Maybe dessert, right? But still, you know, you kind of walk in the lines with ethics there. You can always get into trouble for that. All right, using a natural deprivation state as a modified motivating operant is fine. For instance, using edible reinforcers for desired behavior, 30 minutes before a regularly scheduled meal is allowed. Sometimes it's a really good idea, right? So edible reinforcers for desired behavior, 30 minutes before a regularly scheduled meal is allowed, right? So maybe like, hey, I can add a little sweet snack or something of the sort before you're gonna eat, right? Like, you're really craving for something, right? We can give me something half hour before, something small. All right, and that is chapter 6. After our first presentation, we can get into data collection. All right, who do we get going first? Luciana?
Okay. Hi everyone. So the observation I had this week was over someone managing their negative behavior. So basically I just noticed how this person was going through, like I could tell they were going through a hard time and just like not very happy with where they were at, and they were just so negative, and it was almost like draining people around them. So most of the things that I noticed that they were doing were just like always finding something negative whenever we were having a conversation, like in a group of people. That person would always bring out something negative, like if it anything, just
Relative to the topic that.
either
the
relative
group-
or not.
Okay.
So I noticed that, and also other people noticed it too.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I knew like I was, like I had a point, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So the solutions for this, I think that when you're in a stage of like negativity, and I think you need to take a step back. I think we're all eventually gonna be at that stage if you're not in it right now, or if you've not like been there before. But I just think you need to take a step back and just like either just like take a breath or even meditate, just collect your thoughts and reflect. And one of the most important things that I believe that can help you manage negativity is just like your perception on things. I think it's all about perspective, and like maybe using it as motivation could be a great thing. So realizing what you can control to make your situation be better and control your controllables. You can write down your thoughts and just write down in order like the steps that you need to take in order to be better. And yeah, and thinking about what you can improve, and then just turn it into motivation.
Excellent. That's really good. Any questions? Anybody deal with this type of behavior, well, now or in the past? Where you're surrounded by people who are very negative, and they express their negativity all the time. They're just basically Debbie Downer or something of the how do you go about trying to like manage interacting with that person, like communicating with that person? Yes.
I think this is kind of to do with like your parents, maybe like let's say one of your like your mom or your dad has like a bad day at work maybe, and they kind of come home like all negative and they kind of like take it out on other things.
Mhm.
I feel like that's the most common.
So you're like, hey, you know what? This is energy. Energy can't be destroyed, but it can be transferred. So there's negative energy. You're in the same environment. It's two people, mom and you, right? Bad day. Transfer of energy onto the non-negative person. Now, non-negative person has to do something with the energy, right? So you're like, hey, you know what? Environment matters, and I'm worried about the transference. Am I gonna stop it? Right? It's like the plugging it in the cord, like they're trying to get you to like stick it in, right? So they can transfer it out of them so they can feel better by being really negative. It's actually a technique that that people who are depressed kind of like. You know what I mean? Like sadness, like they become almost a sadist. They kind of like that feeling because it's like taking away all responsibility, accountability, and just letting it go out. Anyone else? Yes.
Like you were saying, perception of it. I think like coming from like a sports background,
Mhm.
it's easier to reflect on like the negatives that are going on. So like for me, like in tennis, it's like a lot of moving parts. So like if my forehand's not good today and I'm losing a lot of points, I'm like, oh, I just can't do anything right today, and I'm generalizing my whole game,
Yeah.
and that's the perception I'm getting.
Yeah.
And so like what my coach would always tell me is like you're always playing in like a valley, and so the high of it is like you're unconscious, like you're playing like the best you can play, you're making no mistakes, but that's like 0.1% of the time, and then the entire time you're playing within that valley. So nothing's gonna be perfect. Just focus on what's good
Yeah.
and work from there.
Absolutely, perception. You're like, hey, some people are negative focused. You're like, hey, in this particular situation, there was positive things. How come you don't mention the positive? Right? Why you only focus on? No, they're kind of tunnel vision on the negative, right? I'll come to you. Yes.
I just remembered like this one classmate I had from last semester. Like, I think she was a freshman. She transferred out of here, unfortunately. It was just like, at first it was like an okay interaction, but ever since I like surrounded myself with her, she was always like the negative type thinker and all that, and I would try my best like to help her out, but even it would drain me to the
Yeah.
point where I'm like, oh, I need to create a boundary here. Like, hey, I gotta focus on my own thing. I understand what you're going through. Like, it's tough, but I'm not a professional and like that. So, like,
You actually told her that?
I had to like verbally say it because she just wouldn't take the hint, and it would get to the point that she would text me after school hours, and it would be in the middle of the nights too. She even created a video about me and somebody else, and I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, I can't, like, I'm sorry, but.
Like speaking negative of you?
It was more like, it wasn't like she was speaking negative about me, it was just her perspective of me.
Yeah.
But like, it was so random, cause she had sent me the video too, and I'm like, what is this, like,
Yeah, think of this, right? I've met extremely smart people in life. Some that could be considered geniuses in certain areas, right? I've met very few objective people, even at the highest echelons of intelligence. Which means that most people I come across are subjective in pretty much every viewpoint that they have. They're speaking from a personal, emotional perspective. Almost like how we view politics in this country today, right? Like, it's never really gonna resolve itself because people are not objective. They can't see how others feel. They're not willing to see, place themselves in the shoes of others, right? So that person not willing to place themselves in the shoes of you, like, hey, why would I bother this person so much? Pretty sure you got a life. Pretty sure you're going through stuff just like I am, right? Maybe I'm more sensitive to things happening in my life than you are, or maybe a situation maybe this and that, right? We'll never really get to it. But having a multiple lens of perspectives, meaning seeing an argument as a circle, not a straight line, right? Most people are on a straight line. But you're like, no, there's this perspective, over here, over here, over there. Where are we? The yin or the yang or somewhere in the middle. Very few people think that way. Which means that you kind of really do have to avoid them. Once again, we call this psychological energy or mental energy. Literally it's energy. So they're gonna drain it from you, right? And even if you help them, you might be helping them in a way that leads to no results. Frustration, all you do this, the 20th conversation about the same thing, right? All you're doing is you literally stealing my energy, right? You're an energy thief, right? And they may be doing it on purpose, but I'm saying they may be doing it as a reinforcer, as a motivator to satisfy them just sharing it with somebody, right? With no real reason to ever resolve the problem. It becomes actually part of their just like everyday behavior, right? So entertaining it sometimes is a I'm sorry, Luciana, you could have a seat. Entertaining it is a reinforcer. You're reinforcing bad behavior, right? That's why, sometimes people do come off harsh to people who they know, like know this person. They don't play into their BS, right? They know this person. Now people who don't know the person that well, you're kind of like, this is your introduction, right? So you're gonna play their game for as long as you play it. And usually it ends up the same way, right? These people have very poor interpersonal relationships because they do the same thing. And that's why we call things like, think of narcissism, right? All right, let's think of antisocial personality disorder, ASPD, right? We think of psychopaths, sociopaths, Machiavellian types. Machiavellian would be people who are obsessed with power, politicians, business people, blah, 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 right? And everyday people. And then you think of the narcissists, right? So kind of what we call kind of a dark triad, right? But really it's kind of four. You're like, hey, they operate off a supply. You're like, supply of what? Supply of attention, right? Their supply, things that they need every day is attention, validation, they troll on purpose, right? Rage bait, right? Start an argument just for purpose. Why? Quite entertaining, right? And now this person's mad and I can walk off happy, knowing that I'm the initiator, right? These types of things. So you kind of got to really observe to be like, well, am I just sympathetic or empathetic? Or is there something else with this person? They really don't care to change their behavior, and they're using me as another tool to satisfy their depressive state, right? Once again, depression is stress, it's anxiety, right? Depression is really the #1 killer on the globe, right? So what we can actually say is that stress, anxiety, is the #1 killer on planet Earth. Now you can say, hey, I'm stressed out. I drank coffee and I got the jitters and I got an exam. You're up here. You're above the threshold line. And if you go below, you're like, oh, I'm depressed. It's just inverse energy of stress, right? Some people are stressed out and they feel tense. Some people are stressed out and they feel low. But that low, they're not tense at all, right? They're not tense at all. But it's gonna take them a long time to climb back up to get to homeostasis, right? The balance. So always think of it like, hey, energy. Hey, you gotta conserve your energy, right? Because you need that too, and some people are energy thieves, or they need their supply. All right, you're like, I don't know, this person might need their supply of validation, attention, right? You're doing something of the sort. Yeah, excellent presentation, right? Hey, mindfulness, breathing techniques, right? You talk about meditation, going inward. That's what meditation is about. Leaving this place, going inside so I can rearrange and focus the internal, right? Simple techniques, breathing. Yeah, absolutely. if you stop right here and take like 3 deep breaths, biologically, you are going to feel better. 4 deep breaths, right? That's why at the doctor's office, like, yeah, they wanna hear your breathing, but they also wanna hear maybe like your heart rate normal. They're trying to get you to a normal state, right? Normal state of balance, to get an accurate reading instead of you. Because they know you're in the doctor's office, you're already tense. You think it's bad news, right? Excellent, control your controllables, write down your thoughts. Like, well, write down, how does it matter? Or type. Here's the thing, writing is more effective than typing. Think of the action, the physical action of typing. Like, there are intervals when my fingers are not touching the keyboard. If I write, specifically if I write in cursive, that's why they really kind of reinforce writing in cursive. It'll allow for a consistent motion without an interval of stopping. Now, if you write block letter, right? Usually they say sometimes, you know, there's no evidence for this, but you know, they say like these are people who may struggle with stress more. Right? People who write in cursive may have a tendency to have a mechanism to kind of resolve their stress. So if you write, but anyway, writing is effective. Right? Typing is effective too. What you're saying, maybe one may have more effectiveness. Writing down your thoughts. And then mindfulness, thinking about how you can improve, you know, in the field of psychology, you can call this metacognition, thoughts about thoughts. So you stop and go like, oh, I just had a thought. Why am I thinking like that? Right? You like start to catch your mindset. You try to catch up. Because remember we said, there's an alien inside your body. Okay? Remember we said that's the unconscious mind. It's like an alien. It's like a parasite, right? Parasite and host. And like, well, one is really making me do stuff, right? All the time. You might gotta go to the bathroom. Okay, that's unconscious. Automatic process of behavior. You gotta go to the bathroom. Maybe you didn't want to. It was an inconvenience. Doesn't matter. That parasite says it's time to go. And the parasite says, let's eat again a lot so we can go again. Right? And the parasite, all these things. And then you finally catch up and you start trying to get control of that. And that's when you start to tend to have discipline kind of over yourself. Right? So think about how you can improve thoughts about thoughts. Why do I think that way? What is it about me? Instead of letting other people ask you, why do you think that? All right? All right, excellent. Very good. Brought up a lot of discussion. All right. All right, I'm briefly going to get into the next chapter on data collection, just so we can get that intro. All right, data collection. Really important, right? Anybody here loves statistics and math and all that? Raise your hand. Everybody here hates statistics and math and all that? Right? We're like, hey, data collection is important, right? For the sake of this class, it's not complicated at all, right? It's just, we could think of maybe the major concepts on how we can take in information, analyze it, and to see if things are effective or ineffective. And if they're ineffective, we make changes to our strategy and our process. Right? But data collection is important in all sciences because it means, hey, is it evidence-based? Do you have evidence to provide for us to see that this works, right? Or are you just saying intuitively it works, right? And even if sometimes your intuition goes against the reality, it's like, yeah, I think it's working. Like, well, that could be a bias, right? How did you feel that day? What did you as an observer, how did you feel that day? Was something going on with you? We have cognitive bias, we all do, right? So like, hey, if we write it down, if we collect it in some way, put it in the computer, mark it, come back to it, look at it over a period of time, we will have less bias, right? The information will speak for itself. All right, it's one of the most important aspects of applied behavior analysis, yet it is the most difficult activity to get other people to do, which means that a target or a client trying to tell them to do it and mark it, like, hey, could you mark every time that you pick up your toy? Good luck, right? We're not gonna do that, right? My doctor would be like, hey, could you take your blood pressure twice a day, every day, until next time you see me, right? And I haven't taken it once, right? So it goes to show you, like, we're not gonna do it, right? So it's kind of more left to us to do this, right? So it's a little bit difficult to get other people to do. Even within the field, one often encounters behavior plans containing a statement such as, staff will be taught how to collect data on these behaviors, or simply staff will take data, right? Difficult to even get staff to do it, even though they're adults. Yet many fail to devote or allow sufficient time to teach observers to record with a high degree of fidelity, right? Fidelity, we're saying truthfulness, accuracy, right? Not fudging information. Why does this matter? Hey, because you need clear, unbiased, valid data to permit you to assess the effectiveness of the intervention that you have selected. And the data that practitioners receive might falsely imply that the intervention has succeeded, right? While periodic fidelity checks might reveal that the observer's behavior has drifted, that a coding question came up, they decided to fix themselves, and that as a result, they're no longer taking accurate data, right? So, once again, let's say we are hired as a therapist and analyst, come to a classroom, come into a school, and we gotta train teachers to help us record information for a specific child or children, right? We're trying to help modify some behavior for children or a specific child. We're not there all the time, or at the same time, there may be other therapists working on the same child, right? So like it's important that we all have the same accurate information, don't fudge and bias the numbers. As therapists, you know, it's a little bit easier for us because we've been trained in this, but if you're getting like teachers to do it, you know, they might switch things up. They might lie because they're like, hey, you know what? My job and my success as a good teacher is that this child's behavior change and I get best teacher award or something of the sort, right? So we have to review the information too. Look at the results to say coding questions. Right, when we're talking about coding questions, it could be a particular behavioral item, particular like facet, like going from point A to point B of a behavior. So yeah, so we have to be very conscious of this. All right, and then lastly, anytime an intervention designed by one person is to be implemented by another, it requires that the implementer be trained to an acceptable level of accuracy. This will help assure accurate data collection and implementation by the behavior change agents, right? Kind of just what I just talked about. All right, who is our next presenter? We got Colin. Making a mess.
Alright. So, a lot of places I go to campus are like just places in general. A lot of people just either leave the stuff on the table, leave stuff on the floor. And for me as a person, I think it's a little rude and like to do that to someone. Like that's working there or has to clean, it kind of takes away from their time to actually clean like other areas of the school or restaurants, just in general. And like some circumstances are more understandable than others. Like with younger kids, I work with younger kids too, and younger kids aren't good at cleaning up their messes. They never are. So you have to help them a little, but like the older you get, the more you expect them to clean their messes. So one example I have was last year in the den, like we have a pool table and a ping pong table. And the ping pongs are all over the floor, smashed, and all the ping pong paddles were ripped apart and thrown everywhere, and then the pool cues destroyed. And so it was a sight like just terrible. It was terrible. So there's some solutions, and the last one the school did. So it was like removing the item or thing. So like they removed like the pool cues and the ping pong like paddles, and put them in like a closet thing where you need a key to get them. And so that one makes sense. One is give praise or like a small reward. Kind of harder to do. I would say like if you're a friend and you don't like how your other friends are doing it, and you give a little praise or something like that. I don't really see how a small reward would help, really. Another one is just being annoying. Keep reminding the person until they actually do clean up. And then also putting up signs telling people to put up the stuff and clean. So like this one right there. So that's all I got.
All right, excellent. Any other suggestions? Hey, look, remember one of our other jobs is to be keen observers of just general human behavior. General. But man, human beings have a proclivity to love to be part of a group. That is a natural, fundamental part of human behavior. Membership within groups, right? It forms our identities, people talk about it, whether you're an athlete, student, you're part of this, you're part of that, race, ethnicity, yada, 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 nationality. People love being part of groups, it becomes part of their identity. So, with something like this, like, how can I make people in this environment feel like they are part of a membership, a group, right? As part of a reward system to give them identity. One thing you could do is maybe have a sign out log where you say, before you leave this area, sign out. And at the top of it, we say that you've organized and returned all your equipment and cleaned up this environment, right? And what that does is reward identity. To write your name down on something, you walk away with a sense of like, yeah, I put that back, I cleaned up. I'm not the irresponsible one, right? So like that reinforces identity, right? And we love that facet of identity. The other part too is that human beings have a tendency to love gamification. That the more you introduce competition in games, the more they're willing to do something. Hence, as a species, we talk about evolution, natural selection. All that simply means is that we are competing against one another for survival, right? So whoever competes the best or adapts wins, right? Kind of love that. That's evolution of all species, competing, right? Predator and prey competing. How fast could you get away versus how fast I can run and try to eat you, right? Competition. So like another thing we could do is put labels on each item, the paddle boards, everything else, into the storage cabinet so that people can gamify areas on where to put them in. It becomes a task of a game, right? Like a little slot to put the paddle boards in, kind of face first or something like that, right? So we could just draw on basic human like tendencies, gamification and identity to be introduced in this environment to kind of say, well, here's some resolution. It seems like this can't be solved, right? Because like it's a free-for-all. And what happens is anything that's a free-for-all creates anonymity. So if you know you can get away with it without being identified, we will all do it, right? As soon as you create order and now there's more of a focus on you, say what's your name, identity, you feel some type of way, right? About it. This becomes like a public space, right? And when public space, you know, people abuse it. They use the bathroom in the corner, they'll do anything, right? So you have to use some of those basic sort of human proclivities. Okay, and lastly, audio. Oh. Who else is left? Oh, that was it, just two, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just two, okay. Sorry. Alright, let's, just end it off there. We'll come back on Monday and talk about more about data collection. And we'll go from there. Also, too, Monday we'll talk about your first kind of, assignments, right? Your major assignments for, your tasks. So we'll talk about that on Monday. Alright, have a great day, everyone.